Hi, everyone. I'm Dana, half of the co-founding partnership of Project ARC. I'm not actually in tonight's conversation, but I did want to take a moment and record a message for everyone like I do at the beginning of all of our conversations. For those of you that don't know, Project ARC is actually a public benefit corporation, which means that we do a ton of volunteer work. And tonight, I had the opportunity to present not one, but four scholarships to local high school seniors on behalf of an organization that I represent here locally, just outside of Harrisburg, Pennsylvania. So I'm not in the conversation. I'm excited to listen to the conversation. And Tim's going to work his magic and he's going to edit me into the beginning of this conversation so you can learn a little bit about why we started this DIS podcast. So to get started, many of you probably do know me for my work in project-based learning and trying to push teachers into that authentic space so that they have that opportunity for learners to affect change in their world. In fact, the ARC in Project ARC stands for Authenticity, Relevancy, and Community Connected Learning. And for the past 20 plus years, my passion and my journey has been to push teachers into that space, which is mostly rewarding, but occasionally it's bumpy. And so last November, I put a call out on LinkedIn for anyone to connect with me if they considered themselves to be a disagreeable person in education. I had no idea where that was going to go. The response was great. We've had several of these conversations since November, and we're excited about the guests that we're having today as they disagree with some issues in education. But that post on LinkedIn was really prompted by a book that I was reading at the time, and a quote that came from Adam Grant's New York Times bestseller, Think Again, The Power of Knowing What You Don't Know. So I want to take a moment and read that quote to you in case you're not familiar. It says, the ideal members of a challenge network are disagreeable because they're fearless about questioning the way things have always been done and holding us accountable for thinking again. There's evidence that disagreeable people speak up more frequently, especially when leaders aren't receptive, and foster more task conflict. They give the critical feedback we might not want to hear but need to hear. So that prompted my call for disagreeable people. Tim and I talked and we thought, all right, let's start this DIST podcast. So our guests today and on our podcast in the future may disagree with us at Project ARC and don't necessarily constitute an endorsement from Project ARC. Instead, Tim and I really want to learn and grow as we think again. And we have no idea what our guests are going to say in the conversation as it unfolds. Heck, I have no idea what they're going to say until I listen to the recording. And as I said before, I'm so excited to listen to that recording. And I'm going to have Tim work his magic, do the editing, and they're going to jump right in. And I'll listen to it in the next day or two. But until then, if you're disagreeable in education, connect with us. Connect with me on LinkedIn, connect with Tim on LinkedIn, and we'd love to have you as a future guest.
In my experience, teachers want they're open to learning. What they don't want is they don't want to be fed through a fire hose and then left and then have issues and no one's supporting them.
Mhm.
And people that aren't in the classroom don't understand, like we were saying, trying to catch up with the technology if it's something that you haven't used,
Mhm.
or whatever it might be. They're trying to do 15 things at once or learn 15 things at once while pulling in the, oh, I'm teaching this to the students in my classroom, and this is what we're supposed to do in lesson 1, and now I got to figure. So all of these pieces. And there was a report, and I want to say it was from CCSSO. I'm saying that, and I don't have it in front of me, but I'm pretty sure it was that. And I know for science, it said that the minimum amount of PD follow through that a teacher has had in 14 years since NGSS came out was 30 minutes. That's average.
Yeah.
So we keep saying to teachers, here's how you do it, here's how you do it, but nobody's showing them. There's nothing out there that walks the teachers through. It's kind of like Priscilla was saying, and Greg both, is this isn't a filter down. So I've met with universities and I've talked about the fact that, we all need to be on the same page. So when the teachers coming out of, teachers college in quotes, are coming into the system, that they have the latest curriculum, the latest techniques, the latest instructional strategies. And we're all in education. So it's like a big Ferris wheel, right? Everything comes back around if you've been in education long enough. But on that Ferris wheel, I always say that every cart that's on that Ferris wheel is an instructional strategy that could touch one student in your classroom. So all of those pieces, even though we keep going around this Ferris wheel, they all have good parts. We just need to work with the teachers and figuring out, okay, you have a student or students that are struggling and they're succeeding over here. Well, what is that teacher doing differently? Are they teaching them more visually than auditorial? Is it, figure it out. I agree that the PLCs, if they're utilized to the extent that they should be, sometimes it's depending, and this goes into a negative of dysfunctional, is if those PLCs are pitting teachers against and not being supportive of let's work together as a team, I think that's where that kind of turnoff becomes. But if you have a professional development that also works with the teachers after that initial training, and hey, let's problem solve. Hey, you're having trouble figuring this out. All right, let me take an hour and spend an hour with you and let's show you how to do this. Maybe your peer 4 doors down that's a math teacher instead of ELA has something similar that they figured it out.
Mhm.
Talk and have those conversations. But I think that we are so quick to just swoop in, PD, drop, and leave that I think that that's where that pushback from the teachers are coming, at least in my experience that I've had, is they're just glad when you walk in, you say, it's not going to be just today. We're going to
Yeah.
walk through this a whole year. We're going to walk this. I'm a phone call away. Don't be afraid. And that's the other thing too. And then I'm going to be quiet. As Greg brought this up, I think in the beginning, was teachers are looked at to be the knower of all. And if we are not the knower of all, then we are not good at our job. And we need to just erase that whole thought,
Mhm.
because technology changes so fast. Classroom changes so fast. Curriculum changes so fast. And what I mean by curriculum changing, I'm talking about maybe one year the district will say, hey, here's the order of the standards. Oh, nope, now we're going to switch up standards because nope, now we're going to. And so it changes in a blink of an eye. It's okay for teachers and administrators to say, I don't know. I need to lean on someone because I need help in this.
Yeah.
That's where I'm leaning.
No, and I think that's good. The one phrase that changed my career as a teacher is I don't know, but I think I know where we can find it out. Right. And
Mhm.
like being willing to say that and admit that with students or with other teachers is critical. But I wanted to point to a dis word that is lurking in this conversation, I think. And you feel free to disagree with me if you want to, because that's the whole point of this. But I I don't think Priscilla quite said it, but she implied it in some of her comments, and then you've been building on it. And that's the notion that learning is distinct, right?
Mhm.
It's not a process that can be standardized and repeated, right? Different students will respond to different strategies. Different students will respond to different teachers because of the way they are as people. Different students will learn from one strategy one day and not the next day, right? That there are distinct moments where learning happens. And yet our whole system is about trying to iron out the distinction so everything is consistent, everybody has the same experience. And I just want to throw that thought out there. Like, is there a real challenge that we face as educators between our daily practice, which is built on recognizing distinction, and the attempts of the system to try to come up with a system that will produce the same results for everybody?
Yes. Oh, wait. Oh, I just jumped in. Sorry.
That's okay.
Well, I was going to say, I have a small comment about that. I'm going to say yes also. But I think sometimes what happens is the people who are making the decisions are not classroom teachers. And in
Mhm.
some cases, they've never been in a classroom. So they try to package everything into this box and say, this is what we want you to do for the district. And it doesn't work. But then we as professionals have to try to figure out and make ways for it to work until it just can't work. Until we're like, okay, we've tried it. This is not going to work. Or maybe it just doesn't work at this school. It might work over at that school, but it just does not work. We cannot take it and just fit it all in a box. It is distinct.
Yeah, and realizing that it doesn't work and speaking up about it is part of being disagreeable, right? It's
Mhm.
like saying, "Hey, wait a minute." But Greg, I see you perched, like ready to go. What do you want to add in here about the question of distinction?
I think distinct gets at the heart of my entire philosophy of self-directed schooling. Um, every learner, the whole idea, I have this issue of one size fits all professional development, where you get all the teachers from all these schools in a room, and you're going to tell them as a district what we're all going to be focusing on, and we're all going to be doing this thing, and a lot of districts, they love to throw in, you can make it your own, which I love that. But you're still insisting on a top-down hierarchical decision-making structure, which defines one of 7 elements of culture in this model that I just created for a master's program. Um, and that decision-making structure has a significant influence on the structural relationships between the different layers in the district and the school.
Mhm.
And so that's where, the teachers, the structural relationship between teachers and students relies on the structural relationship between the principal and the teacher, the district and the principal.
Mhm.
And there's a hierarchical structure that we kind of fall into that pre-exists. And so the decision-making structure influences the relational power dynamics, which influences how norms and traditions are formed, which is a third element of culture, which influences the kind of language, how language develops, how formal, how informal, which influences how resources are often reflect priorities, which influences how art and literature reflects the culture that exists. So there's 7 very objective ways of measuring culture of a school. But what gets me is that once you identify that, you have to understand that everybody has a preference for different aspects of each
Yeah.
element, and they're rooted in core values of what they understand things like respect means.
Mhm.
One teacher might think respect is treat me the way I want to be treated because I'm the teacher,
Mhm.
rather than treat me the way I want to be treated because I'm a human being and I'm going to do the same because you. And so the difference between understanding respect as rooted in self-worth versus position aligns and supports certain elements of culture. But then you go, it's a 5-layer model. But then you go into socio-emotional competencies and you recognize that those look a certain way based on how people perceive certain values and elements of culture. And this is where it gets into what Priscilla was talking about. Because those core 2 layers have to do with ranges of behavior, which are influenced largely by personality traits, which are largely influenced by neurobiological components. A person has high neuroticism not because they want to react strongly to stress,
Mhm.
or someone has a is identified as having low neuroticism as one of the big 5-factor model personality traits, where they don't react terribly strongly and they're really chill and they don't overreact. And But then there's just as much issue with somebody who doesn't react because they don't recognize safety concerns. They don't. There's extremes to these personality traits, and so once you identify that a person's neurobiological components, like their serotonergic systems, and the reward system. There's a lot of them, but there's a
Yes.
lot of chemicals that we release as humans, different amounts of chemicals that are recycled differently, and it impacts our personality, which influences our ranges of behaviors that biologically predetermine ranges that our socio and cultural environments then can shape within those ranges. And so that impacts how social emotional competencies are, how they look in different students. So you get one student who likes this teacher, it's not because that teacher's better.
Right.
It's because that student has a personality with a range of behavior that aligns with how that teacher is talking, because that teacher might be more comfortable with informal versus formal as an element of culture for their classroom, which comes from a certain understanding of values, which comes from a certain personality profile and ranges of behaviors. So there is this interconnection between understanding who we are as individuals, and unfortunately, teachers have never been taught this as kids. They're never taught this in their programs, and they're never coached on this in any professional development programs, because it is the product of research from the last 20 years.
Hmm.
And so, Priscilla, yes, every student is different. And if we're not coaching them on how to recognize how they're different, not for the sake of being different, but because they have different needs, then suddenly we have students where we're telling them, just do it because we said so. And no wonder we have resistance to
Hmm.
learning from students. And then they grow up to be people who don't like learning. Or we have teachers who were taught in ways that connect with them, and they become teachers. And then guess what? They teach that way because it works for them. And we get this generational cycle of, sure, we're open to learning new things as long as it's the way I am comfortable with. So there's a lot of that I would love to talk about, but I don't want to hijack
Yeah. Well, and I think
any more than I already have.
I think we're all agreed that there is this element of distinction, right? And even in our current system, we actually believe that part of what our job is to identify the students of distinction, right? I you know, um, I hear a lot of what you're saying, Greg, and agree on this notion of really helping students develop who they are rather than turn them into this ideal student, the way we reward distinction as a degree of quality or part of the hierarchy of culture. What I'm wondering about, right, is all of you have been saying something along the way about the extent to which we ourselves are trapped in a notion of education because we had to go through it as kids, right? And this generation of teachers, I know my wife teaches at a local university and has talked about the significant difference in the students coming out of the era of No Child Left Behind,
Mhm.
right? That like those kids, and University of Northern Colorado has a really big teacher training program. Those kids go into their teacher training problem, and almost no matter what the professors say to them, right? Their experience from being students through No Child Left Behind has left a particular imprint on them as what it means to be a teacher and what it means to be a learner. Um, and all of us have sort of talked about that imprint. Um, how do we disagree with it when it is, as Greg pointed out, really rooted in the culture? Hallie?
So I want to, and I don't know if this is the place, but it seems like, so also when we're talking about teachers and education now, we have to also take in consideration that not everyone is going through teachers college anymore.
Right.
So we've got teachers that are coming from the business mindset into an educational setting. And so we also have to look at that they may have been the leader of their fill in the blank, right? Wherever they worked. They might have been the lead manager, they might have been whoever. And so I feel like, and we were talking about this. So I did some work with McLean Hospital, Harvard Medical Teaching Hospital, on conditions for success and looking at the key functions in a classroom and what the interaction between the teachers and the students are, and kind of like Greg was talking about, what do they need in order to feel secure, safe, all those feel words, right? Um, and I feel like that we are missing that from a lot of training slash colleges slash, I mean, when I went back into college, into teaching, we had like behavior 101, right? And it was part of this equity. It was part of how do you approach a student that maybe has a rough background or a different background or whatever, fill in the blank. I mean, and that was 25 years ago, right?
Mhm.
And so when you say that, we're looking at this as kind of like silos of coming in from colleges and stuff. I also feel like that right now in education, it's just kind of going back to the basics, right? We've lost the basics of classroom 101 is
Mhm.
what I call it. And that is how to interact with students, how to interact with other adults, to kind of swallow your pride a little bit. I mean, I say this a lot is, 27 years, I have some awards. People told me I was good. I never thought it, right? To me, I was just a teacher. That's who I was.
Mhm.
Hence, I never said when somebody said, "Hey, here's an idea. This might work better." I was always like, "Yeah, let's try it." Like, what do I have to lose? That's fine,
Mhm.
right? But now we've got such this variety of people coming at the educational process that I think sometimes we miss just going back to the basics and starting from there to build on what does this look like in the classroom. And that kind of goes back to what Priscilla and Greg and I were just talking about with even PDs, right?
Mhm.
We put non-educators into these PDs and we say, here you go, have at it. Oh, when you get comfortable, you can make it your own. They don't even know what their own is, with all respect, because I'm super excited that they're even coming to the educational world and I'm happy, but they don't know what they don't know, right? And so to me, it's really, we're missing that big key piece of, we're so worried about all of this other stuff. We just need to get back to the basics.
Well, and I mean, so Priscilla, we've heard some deep thoughts from people who are outside the classroom right now, right? For the most part, supporting teachers, but outside, you're still actually in the classroom working with
Yeah.
kids, doing some cool stuff. Uh, any disagreements with that from the perspective of someone who's still working with kids?
Um,
So take it.
I think Holly kind of really hit the hammer, the nail, hit the head there. She just
Yep.
really kind of touched on it. Being in a classroom and even what, Greg was talking about, things have just changed. And, when people come in to do professional development, Hallie spoke about this a little earlier. They come in to do professional development and then they're gone. Well,
Right.
come back. You come back. And even when they come back, they come back, a couple of months later, or maybe they come back, almost the end of the year. And you're like, where are we at? Well, where were you at?
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
what we really want to say. Where were you at? Yes, we tried this particular, piece in the classroom, and maybe it worked for three teachers down the hall, but for the rest of us, maybe it didn't work. So now what? And because some of them really haven't been in a classroom or haven't been in it long enough, they can't give you that now what? So the teachers are left to kind of figure it out themselves. And because the district has mandated, this is what we're going to do, and this is how we're going to do it.
Mhm.
And so now you're just kind of left. We've given you the PD. Now take this PD and implement it in your classroom. So from that standpoint, again, teachers are having to adjust and try to make it work. It's funny, we have something now that we call Hive 35. And the Hive 35 is really just a model of reteaching, or I guess I won't necessarily call it reteaching, but it's a model where we're helping the students improve on from where they are.
Hmm.
So if students are failing in your classroom, this is a chance for them to really kind of improve, for the teacher to help them improve. It's not for them to redo assignments. It's not for their teacher to reteach what they've already previously teach, but
Yeah.
it's for the teachers to actually implement something new to help, a new strategy to help the kid be able to see, hey, you can do this. We just got to try a different approach on how we're doing this. And so it's a time for every class period, and it's done throughout the week, and
Hmm.
it's only done every 2 weeks. So again, Hive 35 is great and it works for some, but for some it doesn't work
Hmm.
because
Why?
for some of the teachers feel like I don't have time to do this, or this
Wait,
is
wait, wait,
just
wait.
another this is just another PD. I'm already doing, they feel like I'm already doing this, I'm doing this already. And so, but again, it comes back to the PD model. You got to step in and say, hey,
No.
let me guide you and lead you into what really should be happening. Yes, we know we're supposed to be actually um, helping the students in doing these things, but I'm already doing that. That's what we get. I'm already doing that. I'm already helping my student. I'm already doing this in my classroom, so I don't feel I need to make any changes in the
Yeah.
classroom. And Greg, go ahead and throw your point in there. I see you're
Oh,
jumping
I
out.
got a few of them. Oh, okay. Okay, so first of all, why are the teachers in charge of this 35 program? Why are they the ones responsible for telling the students what to do?
Because they're the ones that are in the classroom with the students. So the
Do you
the
agree with
model,
that?
the model has been my approach to it would have been, because I'm already one that the students see every day. I probably would have switched it up and said, okay, on my team we have, these 5 teachers, and we teach. Miss Jones does an excellent job teaching this particular part. Mr. Edwards does a very good job. Let's figure out a system where we can transfer our students during that Hive 35 time period so
Hmm.
that they can get the best model of that particular piece that they're missing. So now it's not me still teaching my students the same thing, but it's somebody else, a new face, and they're learning a different technique, a new approach. I
I
would have tried
disagree
it
with that
that way.
approach.
I would have tried it that way.
I
I would
disagree
have,
with that approach, but I'm curious what Hallie has to say. But because
okay.
I have a way that I'm curious what you think of. Hallie, what did you want to add?
So, two things, right? One thing that you said, Priscilla, that is key, and I think this is absolutely like in bold letters, is I call it and one, right? And one. And you're going to do this and one, right? So here's the curriculum. If it doesn't work, here's something else you need to try. Oh, if that doesn't, here's something else. It's an and
Yes.
one. And in education, we need to stop the and ones, because the and ones are where everybody starts to just feel like they're drowning, right? Because
Mhm.
I get so much thrown at me, and then I can't even do this. And then I can't do this. I can't do this. Now I'm 5 into this, and now I feel like I'm a failure, right? And then you're going to come back
Oh,
at me and tell me. That's so when you were saying that to me, that's the and one. I say it to teachers all the time. I'm not telling you to do this as an and one. Here's what we're going to do. And I'm going to show you how this is going to fit into the curriculum. I will tell you, Greg, that we did that. So we actually moved students. I was in an inner city, really tough crowd, and we moved students around and we saw huge successes.
Mhm.
But what we also did was we had mentor meetings that went back and had both teachers meet with the student and talk about, like, how was this helpful to you, so
Mhm.
that that could actually transfer back to the original teacher. So the goal was eventually Priscilla and I, or you and I, wouldn't switch any students. We would have a working relationship between us to
Hmm.
where I kind of learned how this, but basically you were teaching me what worked. So if I didn't have that tool in my toolbox, I
Mhm.
now have that tool in my
Hmm.
toolbox, because we were left, the teachers, to fend for ourselves, to figure things out. That's what I was going to say. But go
Yes.
ahead.
Yes. 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 Yes.
Go ahead,
Okay,
Greg. I know
Greg.
you don't agree.
Yeah, he's already told us he doesn't agree with that,
I
Mom.
Oh, absolutely not.
know.
And that's why I feel so safe here. Because ultimately, well, first I want to say, for sake of time, I went on a big long diatribe earlier. You can cut that. Because this is way more interesting. That the idea that students, when they're first taught something, they're taught from a teacher and the students have an expectation that what the teacher is saying is everything the student needs to be able to do. So already I disagree, because the student is being told what to learn, when to learn it, how to learn it, and oftentimes why to learn that thing. So already we're starting from a place where the students are passively receiving information and expected to be assessed at a specific time that have nothing to do with however it is that they're approaching the material from their distinct places of peoplehood.
Mhm.
And so then you get a high 35 where it's not reteaching, but you're still applying the same, this teacher is going to teach you and you're going to passively receive this, and then you're either going to understand how they said it or you're not. But your job as a student is to then just listen to this person. And if that doesn't work, it's not your fault because we just didn't give you the right teacher. So then you give them this other program that's still built on this model of, we're going to tell you who to listen to, and if they don't get it, you know what, that's just on us, not you, the student, because you are not responsible for your learning, because you have zero authority for what you're going to learn, when you're going to learn it, how you're going to learn it, and definitely why you're going to learn it. And so why I'm sitting here is because fundamentally, schooling has to change, not just in how we are applying pedagogy, but how we're understanding the purpose of school as something that if we're not telling the students, now get this, you get a sixth grader who doesn't understand the concept of multiplication. They know, they've memorized enough of them to get to sixth grade, but they don't understand what multiplication is. And so then you teach them, because they know all the tricks, you teach them exponents. But because they don't understand that repeated addition is multiplication, and then they don't understand that repeated multiplication is exponents, which means when they get to high school, so they have to learn all these tricks to learn exponents, right? So then they get to high school and they're taught logarithms in Algebra 2, a requirement for graduation, and they don't understand that that is just an inversion of exponents, a repeated exponent. It's just a concept that builds on what they were taught in second grade with repeated addition. Because they are not taught how skills develop. They're in grade level silos where they're taught tricks to do this to pass the assessment because that's what the teachers told them to do. There is no buy-in from the students to want to learn what multiplication is because nobody told them that it connects to what they're going to learn in fifth grade when they're introduced to exponents, because the state standards, which need to be revised, so that I'm a big fan of Common Core, but one of the big issues is the math Common Core standards, as brilliant as they are, they don't line up the skills across grade levels to make sense. And so I had to redesign all of it. I actually created an app called Exploring the Core, Math K8. It's on iOS, but it visually shows you how the skills develop across grade levels, and the students can be coached to learn addition, subtraction, multiplication, division. Some students are going to learn all of those things in 1 year. The student who struggles with repeated addition and subtracting and even counting backwards in first grade from 100 to 0, which is not a standard, is just something you should teach, that those students that struggle in first and second grade because they're not developmentally ready for it are never taught it again.
Right.
They are going to struggle with what the things they're supposed to be taught because they have not been given any authority on deciding when they know they are ready to learn something. And when you tell a kid that I had a sixth grader who didn't understand multiplication, trying to do complex word problems involving multiplication. The moment you show them how to multiply and how it makes sense, and then you work them through as a sixth grader what they were supposed to learn as second, third, fourth, and fifth graders, because they're developmentally more developed and capable. Holy smokes, they move through that stuff in a year's worth of math in weeks. And so it's a matter of identifying not which teacher needs to teach that kid so that they can learn the tricks to pass the test. It's how do we identify when a kid is ready to learn a thing, and how are we going to coach them to tell us when they're ready for the next thing, which we've already told them is coming.
Yeah,
Well,
and like I
Greg,
want to congratulate you all for being the first group that has had a real disagreement, right? Uh, Most everybody else has just been sort of like trading dis words back and forth, but basically hunky dory. And I am mindful of time. So I would like to just give Priscilla and Hallie a chance to offer any disagreement and then offer a summary, right? Of some threads that I thought were interesting that might be worth pulling in the future conversations that we might have. But Priscilla, go ahead.
Greg, I was just going to say you partially spoke a little bit of how I teach in my classroom. One thing that I do in my classroom is help my students make their learning relevant. I think anytime that you can take what you're teaching and make it relevant to the students, they learn it faster, and they don't struggle with it. And I teach accounting.
Hmm.
So for to be able to and a lot of I hear a lot even teachers say, "Oh, accounting is hard, accounting." I said, "No, it's wonderful." But to be able to take it and make it relevant, whether it's accounting or finance or ethics, when the student can actually see what they're learning and how it's going to benefit them through life, what they're going to do with it, they learn it fast. They want to learn it. They embrace it. But when you can't connect those dots, that's where I think students struggle. That's where I think now you need another teacher that actually can connect in a different way to that student. So
I
that's
like
one of
that.
the reasons why I say I would take the Hive 35 and move it around that way.
Okay, cool.
Yeah.
Hallie,
And
final
I
thought
think
from you.
also,
Yeah.
Greg, along those lines, no. I agree. And I think right now in education, we're seeing inquiry a lot. And I think that it's being pushed at a positiveness to the students. I know, quite frankly, and Tim and I have talked about this a lot because I was a project-based teacher. Like, why is this even important to me? Why do I care? And if I don't care about this, is there something close to whatever I'm teaching that I can connect to and I want to learn about? Feel free, right? Go for it. And again, we're going back to that, we're pushing the system, right? But I
Mhm.
think with inquiry, you're seeing a lot of teachers who are really having to, like Priscilla said, make it connect with the students, right? And
Mhm.
then letting them kind of explore on their own also, and I could be wrong, Priscilla, because I am not an accountant, nor do I do like accounting. I promise. I still like you, just I'm not an accountant person. But anyway, it's one of those things that I can see that as a person, right, in high school, there's all kinds of things right now with all the college and the money that's out being thrown at these at athletes and everything. Like, what do I do? There's 1,001 things that connect students. But I think it goes back to that true kind of connection to what is that conditions for success, right? Why do I care? What is this going to be in my future? I go back to why did I have to, and now we're going back a few years. Why did I have to memorize theorems and postulates? Postulums.
Mhm.
I to this day, I couldn't even tell you what they are, but let me tell you, I had to sit at the table until I learned them. If somebody would have said back then, I had a chemistry teacher who took me in and said, "Hey, I think you'll be great in chemistry." And I said, "Oh, I think you're highly mistaken." She's like, "No, I think you've got the mindset for it. We're going to work at the time with Kroger Technical Institute, and you are going to go design products with Kroger's. And I'm going to show you what we do in class to connect the pieces." And I went, "I'll give you a year. and I loved it. And I've been in science ever since.
Hmm.
But it took that one person, that step out, to make me connect with, why do I care? Right?
Mhm.
Why do I care? And so I think that that's an integral part of this process. And my hope is through this process and through more and more administrators seeing the success of students who are not your normal successful students in a classroom, right? That this will become more the norm than it is not, and where students can take that kind of that self, I can't remember what you called it now, but self-schooling, whatever you want.
Self-directed schooling.
Thank you.
Yep.
There you go. But allowing them to become kind of the stewards of their learning, and therefore becoming more important for them to learn and to see where they're what they're interested in, and allowing that to connect.
Yeah. So I think we're starting to land in some common places, and I just want to pull out a couple of threads to wrap us up that I think are really strong. I think all of us agreed that we are in a situation um, where we try to disrupt, but then walk away and leave people behind, whether it's our teachers that we're providing professional development to, or whether it's students, right? Because we're not showing them the connections across the curriculum or whatnot. It's sort of like learn this and then we move on, right? Priscilla, if you can figure out how we can get, and any of you, right, how we can get teachers to actually want coaching on PD that we do with them in August during the year, as opposed to wanting to jealously guard their after school time, before school time, or prep time for what they're used to doing as teachers, right? Like we would love to figure that out because like that's something that we try to promote. Like, we'll be with you all year long whenever you want. And we get like 2 phone calls, right, from people who want support. But I do think that's a fundamental problem that we have with our education system is we try new stuff and we leave a lot of people behind without the support they need to go forward. And I think we all talked about that. Um, I want to just throw out one last thing that I think is messing around in our conversations, and we won't have time to talk about it, but I just want to throw it out for our audience who may be like, wow, if they stick with this whole thing, that maybe is that I think the disjointedness that a lot of us are feeling in education right now is that contrary to the popular belief that students became wild animals during the pandemic. Right. And I hear the word feral children all the time from educators, right? I think what a lot of kids did during the pandemic that we as educators are struggling with is they did actually learn how to be self-directed learners during that time. They didn't necessarily learn to be self-directed learners on biology or calculus or things like that. They learned to be self-directed learners on some things that they were curious about. Um, and I think that has disjointed our education system a lot because they don't want to come back to the model that Greg has described, which I think is pretty typical, that they're going to be, the I do, we do, you do, they're going to be shown exactly what they need to do. And as long as they imitate it, they're going to get good grades, right? They're like, no, I actually went and explored kind of the birds outside in my bird feeder because I was curious what they all were. And that led me into inquiry about all the different kind of birds in my area and all that sort of stuff, right? Um, and so I'm just going to throw that out there for our audience as something that I think all of us are touching on here, right? Because it connects with Hallie's idea about needing to fill gaps in the curriculum, right? Is there are gaps that are there to be filled by both student agency, which is the most common phrase of it, but also some more student authority about what they learn. Priscilla, I think you're absolutely right that students having an ability to build a relationship with a teacher that works for them is important, but part of that should not be just that it's a teacher they can follow, right? Like this teacher showed me what to do and it worked for me, but also a teacher that they can respect by disagreeing with, right? And so to say, I see how you're trying to do this, but to me, it makes more sense to do it this way, right? And I'll close with this idea that inspired me for a long time because we've talked about math and science here a little bit. We worked with a school many years ago in upstate New York that did the coolest thing ever. It was a simple little activity. It took one day. The math teachers all asked their kids to take a problem home and have their parents solve it, right? They had a very diverse population, kids from like 50 countries around the world, and the kids brought that together. And then the kids were asked to post on a map of the world in the foyer entryway of the school, like where are your parents from so we can see how they solve these math problems, right? And what they got was this radically, like, depending on whether the kids were from East Asia or Africa, East Africa, West Africa, part of the colonial system or not, right? The United States, Canada, Britain, like they got radically different ways to solve the problem, right? Because there are radically different ways to solve the problem. There's not just one way, and that's part of what Common Core is designed to address. So I think the more we remember that, um, that like disagreements about ways to solve math problems are good things in class, right? That we don't have to be all on the same page. The more likely we are we're to light that spark that Greg is talking about in kids.
Thank
Thank you,
you.
Dr.
Thank
Tim
you.
Kubik.